I'm Kirk Sisco, and I played the plainclothes homicide detective in Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2.
Brazos. Brazos! Remember the Alamo, cowboy?
So before Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, I was an actor, mostly commercials, occasionally a film or TV part. Prior to that, I had been an art director at a couple of different Houston, Texas advertising agencies.
Lieutenant Enright, sir. We heard you might be headed this way. Did you come over for the big game?
The script came to me through my agent here in Dallas, and I could see that it was a black comedy. I was familiar with the original Chainsaw, knew that it was a flat-out, straight-up horror movie. And this one was obviously very different, and so I thought it was an ambitious take. But as long as Tobe Hooper was on the project, I thought, okay, let's go do this and see if I can land this part. I know I auditioned for Pat Orseth, who was the casting director in Austin. I knew I had, like everybody else, drive over to Austin to do the audition, but for some strange reason, I do not remember the audition.
If you go around promoting this chainsaw...
Trying to speak plain. Saves time.
Mainly when I arrived, by that time I had learned all my lines, and my main objective was just to hit my marks and not delay the shoot, any more than I might have ordinarily expected with minor delays because of camera position or things like that. I didn't want it to fall on me to be responsible for screwing up. So I wanted to be really tight with my lines, and I was. And that's pretty much it. I knew that it was a black comedy, and the thing about comedy, you've just got to play it as you would play it if it was a drama, just with an over-investment in what you're after. So I knew as that character, my job was to get Dennis Hopper the hell out of town because it was Texas OU weekend and football is very important. So that was my, that was my prep for that shoot that day. I arrived in the morning and they picked me up at my hotel. We went in the shuttle bus with just me to pick up Dennis Hopper. And he got on, and we went out to the location, and we were done by, I want to say, about 5 o'clock. Oh yeah, I've got lots of great stories to tell about Dennis Hopper. That was one of the big deals for me in working on the film, was to get a scene with Dennis Hopper. I've been a big fan of his forever, and I, in preparing for the part, was expecting to see the Dennis Hopper from his troubled days in Taos, New Mexico, where he was a train wreck, or the way he looked in Apocalypse Now, which was the last movie he was in, I think, before career collapse and all of his big personal troubles with substance abuse and all that. I expected to see him looking like a wild man, but here comes this guy who has, he's back to his fighting weight, and he's got a haircut and a manicure. And he said, "Hi, my name is Dennis." And I went, "Oh, okay, so we're going to play it like that. Well, it's nice to meet you." And he said, "Would you like to run lines?" And I said, "Of course I would like to run lines with Dennis Hopper." We did it all in a minimum of takes. We were both tight with our lines. And as I say, they were running and gunning to get it done as fast as they could. So Tobe wasn't asking for too many retakes. I'll tell you an interesting story. In that scene, Dennis and I are walking side by side from the car crash to his car as I'm trying to explain that he can't hang around. If he doesn't do what I tell him to do, I'm going to put him on a plane back to Amarillo and get him out of town if I have to. I don't think you can tell, but Tobe had, for some reason, when I showed up, that suit that I'm wearing is my suit, and I also was wearing a pair of my own a nice pair of Florsheim shoes. And first thing he said was, "We got to get you out of those shoes." Okay, so he sent me to the wardrobe trailer, and he came himself and said, "Put him in those." And they were these shoes that were about 3 sizes too big for my feet. And I still, to this day, I never asked him why you put me on why are you putting me in these shoes that are too big for my feet? But that whole way, walking from that car up to Dennis's vehicle, all I was doing was scraping my feet along the ground to try and keep those shoes, from stepping out of the shoes. Still don't know if it was an actor thing that he thought if I was preoccupied with that, I wouldn't be too focused on trying to do just the right scene, and he thought he might get a better performance out of me. Have no idea. Or if he was just playing a trick on me, just for the hell of it.
Hell. Hell's exactly what they raised.
I've worked on a lot of TV shows and movies, and this was one of the more happy experiences I've ever had. There wasn't any power struggle going on. I've been on some sets where the director is just a flat-out jerk. Toby was very pleasant to work with, as was the crew.
Time eats money.
As I look back on it now, I enjoy the quote that I heard from Kit Carson. I read it from Kit after the movie was made, and they were doing the promotional part of it before the movie was, the movie was released. And he said that he had been at North Park Mall, and there were these people running around in khakis and pastels, and he thought, yeah, these people need to be chainsawed. And he was talking about yuppies, and I got it at that point, and I agreed. And I think, frankly, that my character I may have been cast as the police detective because I was I looked at that time a little bit like those people he saw in North Park Mall that he said, yep, they need to be chainsawed. In fact, I was told when I visited the set later that they had been thinking about bringing me back to get even with my character for setting up Lefty Enright the way I did and chainsawing me. And I said, okay, I'm ready, let's do it. But it turns out Canon had cut the budget so badly that they were just having to do it as fast as they could. So I never came back.
Sir, this is always a pretty hairy weekend for Dallas.
Later on, I was working on another job in Austin a couple of weeks later. By that time, they were shooting at the old Austin American Statesman print room, which was a huge building. And that's where they did the cavern lair of the family. Lou Perryman later described it as the best haunted house you could ever visit, and it was. I'm sure my mouth was hanging open for the first few minutes after I got there. I was over near the craft service table and just started walking around and looking at the stuff they had done to make that place look so creepy weird. That's when I found out that they had discussed bringing me back to chainsaw me. But what I do remember is thinking to myself, this is the most macabre-looking, creepy-looking set I will ever be on in my life. They did so much with so little money, it was amazing. Kit Carson was doing rewrites constantly during this film, and he was doing rewrites on our scene. He was, in fact, underneath a big oak tree with his Olivetti typewriter, manual typewriter, and just before we shot the very last scene where Dennis drives away, an assistant ran over to me with a script revision, and I looked at it, and it was that line where I say, remember the Alamo cowboy. It wasn't in the original script when I arrived, but he wrote it right there on the spot, and when I saw it, I went, oh, okay, that's juicy. Let's see what we can do with that. And it's the line that people still say to me now if they recognize me from the movie, which is less and less as I get older, but they remember the line.
Remember the Alamo cowboy?
I had known Caroline for years before either of us were cast on that film, and I was really glad for her that she got the female lead in the picture. She committed just completely to that part. You can't find a thing wrong with how she filled out that character. Talk about laser focus, she was. It was a very physically demanding part for her. Luckily, we were all young and she could do that part, but they beat her up pretty good. Lou Perryman, he was so likable. The last time I saw Lou, I was in Austin for the film festival at the Driscoll Hotel, and I was finished. I'd been pitching a screenplay of my own and I had a commitment back in Dallas and was heading up to my car. I don't know if you have been there, you know where the Driscoll is. It's on a hill out to the side. You walk up the hill, and back then there was a parking lot up the hill on the other side of the street, which is where I was going. Well, somebody calls out my name, and I turned around and looked, and it was Lou up on the second floor balcony saying, "Where are you going?" And I said, "Hey, man, how's it going?" And, you know, I didn't even realize you were here. He said, "Don't go, stay, let's have a beer." And I said, "I can't. I got an appointment back in Dallas at 1 o'clock or whatever time it was. I don't remember now." But I said, "See you soon." And that was the last time I saw him. And the next thing I knew, he'd been killed by that crazy man with an axe, which was the most bizarre thing I've ever heard. Whether it was somebody I knew or not, he was asleep on his couch, and the guy came in and just went to work on him with this axe and stole his car and took off. And that was 2009, and I don't know how old Lou was, but he was much too young to die, especially in that way. Lou was one of the most likable people I've ever met in this business or out. So it was a real, you know, it was terrible. It was terrible. Well, we were invited out to watch a private screening at Canon, and it was in their big screening room, and they had a lot of celebs there. I don't know if you've ever seen It's a Mad, 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 Mad World, but Dick Shawn was there, which just blew me away. Lorraine Newman from Saturday Night Live was there, and I just kept thinking, this is one of those pinch me moments where, you know, how did I get here? And I thought at that time, if the object was to make a Texas independent cult type movie, they hit, check off every box.
They can't do this. They can't do this.
And I thought people are either going to warm up to this because it's so different, or the people who loved the original Chainsaw for all the reasons they love that movie are going to just hate it because it's a complete 180 from the tone of the first film. And I was right. There was a lot of critical, that people compared the two, as I'm sure they knew they would. And Canon had changed the film from what it originally was intended to be. But all in all, I thought they checked off all their boxes the way they intended to. It's just been a surprise to me that it's grown in popularity and is now and has been a cult movie for all these years. So I'm surprised to be asked to do this interview. How many day player type actors like me can be lucky enough to be in a cult movie and 36 years later they want to do an interview? It's part of Texas lore, and I can say I was a little part of that on some small level. And it's fun,